Hallam University, and Professor Heidi Probst, who is a radiographer at research.
Fumbling, don't you? Okay, can everybody hear me? Yes. No? Yes. Chris, stop shaking your head if you can hear me. Yeah.
We can hear the rattling.
Can you hear the rattling? Can everybody hear? Let's just test your mics.
Hello.
Yeah, I think we're going, right. Okay, we've got an in conversation piece. Whether we're quite Jonathan Ross or not, I'm not sure. We're going to go through, I'm going to ask some questions of the panel around their research careers, what's inspired them. We've got a Twitter account, so if you put the hashtag research AHP with a QC question for the conversation after, we'll hopefully pick up some of those questions and I'll ask them at the end. We'll also go out to the audience for you to ask for any thoughts that you've got. So let's see how this goes. So first of all, I'd like my panel members to each introduce themselves. So Karen, can we start with you, please?
Yep. My name is Karen Sage, and I have spent 1 month in Sheffield so far. Came in February. Pleased to be here.
I'm Rebecca Palmer. I'm a speech and language therapist and a senior lecturer at the School of Health and Related Research at Sheffield University.
I'm Heidi Probst. I'm a therapeutic radiographer and I'm a researcher here at Sheffield Hallam University.
Okay. So can each of you please give me just a brief introduction to your career journey? So again, if we could start with you, Karen. Please.
Jolly good. I should have said I was a speech and language therapist and that I work at Sheffield Hallam, and it didn't occur to me. Sorry. A brief introduction to my career. It was the messy graph from Avril to becoming the professor. I studied languages for my first degree. I lived abroad for a bit, and then I decided to train as a speech and language therapist. I then worked in the NHS in Burnley and Liverpool and Northumberland. And then I saw this job at Manchester University that was a 2-year post to work. They needed a speech therapist who spoke Spanish. And that was a piece of luck. And I did that job, and then another job came along, and a lecturing post came along, and at that time people didn't have PhDs who were lecturers in speech and language therapy. So a very key person in my life was a man called Andy Ellis from the University of York, and he took on the unenviable job of supervising me for my PhD part-time while I did the teaching and research. And then I worked in Manchester for a while, and I just recently was at Bristol in the Speech and Language Therapy Research Unit. And it's from there that I've come to Sheffield.
Thank you. How about you, Rebecca?
I knew quite early on that I wanted to be a speech therapist, so I did my first degree as a speech therapist and then worked in North Lincolnshire as a general therapist for about 2.5 years, and then saw an opportunity that came up at the university working with Pam it was a baptism of fire research project, European research project, where no one spoke the same language or professional language. So I did that. It was a great introduction to research, and was lucky enough to be able to do my PhD at the same time. And then following that, I went back into clinical practice for 50% of my time, working as a specialist speech therapist on the stroke unit here in Sheffield, and the other 50% of my time I did some research projects, but then had another great opportunity working for the NIHR Stroke Research Network, coordinating rehabilitation trials. What did after that? And then I started getting grants in of my own, I suppose, and went back to the university as a research fellow, and then a couple of years ago, got an NIHR Senior Clinical Academic Lectureship, which has given me that space to develop bigger grants. And I've done various bits of sort of honorary clinical work in and out throughout that.
Thank you. And Heidi, your career track's a little bit different, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So I qualified as a therapeutic radiographer, and I worked clinically in the NHS for about 14 years. I started my PhD when I was clinical, doing it part-time, and I was a superintendent at the time. It was quite a struggle, and bringing up a small family as well. And I was lucky I got awarded a Department of Health Research Fellowship, which allowed me to finish my PhD full-time. I then joined Sheffield Hallam University as a senior lecturer, and took as many opportunities for small pockets of funding as I could to keep my research going. And in 2013 I was appointed as a reader, and only recently, last year, appointed a professor.
So, Rebecca, on your career journey, what do you think you did that was particularly helpful?
I don't think I had a particular plan, and sometimes I kind of think people think you have to have some kind of master plan, and I, in a way, I think it might have been more helpful not to in some ways. So I just took opportunities. I saw things that looked like they were for me, like Nadine said, that looks like it might have my name on it, and went and have sort of taken opportunities. But with that, I suppose I've had to be prepared to take some risks. So a couple of times I've left permanent contracts for sort of 18-month contracts and moved areas, moved house on the risk that hopefully I'd have a job at the end of the 18 months, that sort of thing. So I think that's this, taking opportunities and taking risks, but also I've had a brilliant mentor and someone who's been confident for me when I'm not confident for myself, and someone who pushes me out of my comfort zone.
What about you, Heidi?
I suppose I've done a lot of the things that a lot of the speakers have already taught about today, really, which is concentrating on trying to publish and build my CV up over the years. And I tried to concentrate on doing really high quality research because I knew that was important. And I think when I moved into academia, what I tried to do was to combine my teaching and research, or made sure that they were in similar areas. So my teaching topic is the same as the area that I do research in. It just makes it easier because I can feed my research into the teaching, and also the students that I work with are all practitioners. I teach master's level students, and so a lot of the discussions we have online actually stimulate research ideas that and other areas of practice.
And would you have done anything different on reflection, or?
Yeah, I would, and I think it's interesting listening to Rebecca talk about having a good mentor, because I struggled actually, particularly postdoc, as a therapy radiographer who was the first one to get a PhD in the UK. I didn't really know where to go for mentorship, and I had a period in my postdoc time where I was a bit kind of all over the place. I wasn't really sure what my direction was, and I would have it would have been better if I'd managed to get myself a really good mentor and somebody that I could have gone to help me decide what my direction should have been.
So Karen, were there any
Could
key...
I just say a couple of things? One of the things I want to say is persist, really, because I was taught by somebody inspirational when I was an undergraduate. Well, actually, I was doing the diploma. And she said, when you get to your first job, you must ring up your local university and you must get involved in research. And I rang up. I was in Burnley and I rang up Manchester, and they said, go away, more or less. And then I went over to Northumberland and I rang up Newcastle, and they said, go away. And you need to persist, and you need to go up here. And I rang up York, and they said, come. And 12 years keep bashing at the door. So do persist. And now I think the climate has changed such that people will open the door much more easily and be really keen to have your expertise. I think at that time people were thinking, this is a curious person and we don't quite know what to do with her.
Were there any other key challenges that you came across, Karen, and sort of how did you overcome them?
I think not understanding the systems, really not understanding. When I went into the university, I didn't understand the university at all. You have to learn fast, and having somebody to explain the systems. When you try and do some NHS research, one of the best things that you can do is have your feet in both camps and getting in touch with your research and development people in the NHS, in the hospital. They teach you more than the university people can in that sense about NHS governance and how to make it happen in the NHS, I think.
So as you say...
Sorry, you were going to ask me a different
No,
question.
it's fine. As you say, things, sort of opportunities have changed, I think, a lot in the last 5 years. So, Heidi, are you able to summarise what you think the opportunities and support that's now available to people they can tap into?
I think so. I think mindsets have changed, definitely, and also the NIHR training fellowships and the opportunities. They're a fantastic opportunity to get into doing research, but there are also, and they're quite competitive, but there are some other funding opportunities, and Cancer Research UK is just one of them. So they do this funding where it's for pre-doctoral, so you can actually apply to get some funding to do some research, to consider whether actually a PhD is for you and whether research is for you. And there's lots of those little opportunities around now from different funders.
Okay. One of the things I constantly hear is clinicians come and do MSCs, whether they're clinical MSCs or the MRESs, and then they go back into the workplace environment and they're sort of drowning under the pressures of the NHS. Do any of you have any advice to clinicians really as to how they might manage that and what they need to do to sort of to take that career forward? Okay. Karen, do you want to sort of pitch on that?
Well, yeah, one of the things I was thinking just when we were talking about that is that it seems to me that we're thinking about being involved in research as getting an MSc or getting a PhD or getting on a NIHR pathway, and that we might want to widen the way we look at that. So one of the things that really helped me early on is that there was a research clinical interface group, and in terms of taking a step into the void, I presented at that in front of academics a case that I was puzzled about, and I didn't know what was the matter and how to treat them. And that was back when I was, well, what year would that have been? Back in the early 90s. And it turned out that this person had semantic dementia, and I had never heard of that. And then got involved in research about that as a clinician. And so sometimes I think I had no intention of doing anything more, just what on earth is the matter with this person? I can see it, I don't know what it is. So sometimes not necessarily thinking, and I must get a master's or I must get a paper, but I must get involved in research because we know different things from different angles.
Okay. Yeah, that answers that. So just moving on a little bit, we've talked about, we've heard this morning about NIHR careers, funding support. Rebecca, you were successful in gaining some funding support. Are there any key advice that you'd offer to people who think, actually, that's something I'd like to go for?
Yeah, and I think first of all, there's lots of different awards for different types of things and at different levels. So I kind of think one of the first things to do is read the rules, read what they're looking for in that particular thing. So I think you can waste a lot of time applying for something that, if you'd read the instructions, you'd realise that you didn't fit. And so I think kind of making sure you're going for one that you do fit. And then the other thing that often strikes me is, particularly with the NIHR, and I'm sure with other organisations, is that there's a whole language, and there's certain words that might mean something in NIHR language that might have slightly different meaning somewhere else. And so I think one of the really important things to do if you're wanting to go for that kind of funding is to learn to speak NIHR. And just, well, I think, and just like learning to speak any language, the best thing you can do is immerse yourself in an environment where other people speak NIHR. And I think there's some really good opportunities for that now. So there's things like with the clerks, there's clerk secondments and internships and things where you can just sort of be around other people who use that kind of language. And I think that must help really at interviews and using, getting the right buzzwords in there. Yeah.
I think I think there's a number of people here who are clinicians who may want to get involved in research but don't necessarily want a sort of formal clinical research career, as we've heard from our presenters this morning. Heidi, do you have any suggestions for how these people can support contributing to research and to clinicians?
Yeah, I think everybody's got an opportunity to support research, even if you don't want a research career. And I think it's important, if you are interested in research but don't want a research career, to support your colleagues who are doing research, and also to implement the research findings. Look out for trials or projects that are going on in your area, so that you're aware of what projects are ongoing, so that you can refer patients to those trials. I think they're key things that would help.
Okay. And finally, I want to come on to ask you about what personal attributes do you think are needed for a successful research career? And I'm going to put you on the spot here, Karen. Can you kick us off on this one, please?
Well, I already mentioned one of them, which is to persist. And I think you do have to be resilient, because plenty of people say no. You have to remember that, what I know about myself is I'm not stupid, but I'm not enormously intelligent and bright either. I'm relatively normal. And and I am the only person in my family with a degree, and they all think I'm extraordinary and very proud of me, but I am a normal person, and it is incredibly hard work to do, but people can do it. And I get distressed when they go, well, you can do it. Well, yeah, I did it, but so could you if you choose to. And I really enjoyed Avril's description about balance and making sure that we don't all get divorced, and all the rest of it, which is what that paper said, didn't it? It said we're all divorced. No friends, yeah. I must remember that. So I think the resilience and persistence, and really taking, when we say I do not have the intelligence or the brains, or really having a look, is that really true? Just take another look in the mirror and go, okay, if I haven't got that, maybe I should join up with somebody else who does. I don't have mathematical skills. I'm not a great statistician, but I can do it if pushed, and I can get other people to check it. So pairing up, getting the right supervisor. Oh, the other thing I'd really like to say is, remember, you've got to spend a lot of time with them. So if you really think, I think she'd drive me wild, don't choose that person, because you get to choose as well as us. I better stop there.
I think I was hoping to get some questions from the floor. Have we got a microphone? Have we got them tweeted through? A couple tweeted through. So, Sarah Yates, are you here? Would you like to ask your question, because you've tweeted it?
Yeah.
Oh.
I was just wondering, because all three of us are postgraduate students in radiotherapy, and I think we were just wondering kind of what opportunities we should be looking at now, and how to get into research upon graduation and things like that. Because I mean, it's hard to see a defined career path, and we just kind of wanted some advice on what you're saying, really.
I guess that's for me, isn't it? Well, I'm absolutely delighted that you're interested in research, first and foremost. And second thing, I'd be happy for you to come and talk to me in a bit more detail. But there are a number of things. So, for example, this university has this year the VC scholarships. That's one opportunity. So that's a funded PhD full-time for 3 years. It's not a huge amount of money. I think the difficulty with qualifying is whether you take a job that pays quite well, or you take a lower PhD scholarship. That's a decision to have a think about. But doing it full-time means you get it done much quicker, and then there are opportunities for people who are PhD qualified. So there is that route. There's also the NIHR route, so you can qualify learn your craft a bit more as a clinician, if you want to develop your clinical skills for a little while, and then apply for one of the NIHR training fellowships to do a PhD. If you don't want to necessarily do a PhD, but you want to do research, then I would say look for a job in a radiotherapy centre that has a reputation for doing good quality research, and I'm happy to talk to you about the centres that I think are the really top-notch research leading, and get yourself aligned, go and meet those those clinical professors and researchers, and say you're interested, and have they got anything that you can get involved in. There's always lots going on in those centres.
That'd be great.
Is that okay?
Do you have any other questions for the panel? Do you need a microphone? Or there's one here.
Tony Redden from the University of Leeds. One of the things we often see for people coming into research, particularly from the allied health professions, is that people are often quite experienced practitioners by the time they decide they want to get involved in research, but they're going to be very junior researchers. So can I guess, ask the three of you how you've managed that tension between being a respected and established practitioner and being a complete newbie in research?
Who would like to?
Well, I
speak to?
don't think I can answer this because I was never an established and respected clinician.
How are you?
I was a manager in Northumberland of a health service, and it was a big shock in the sense that I didn't know what to do at all in the university. I didn't know how to switch on a computer at that time, and there wasn't an on button. It does not say on the computer, and I didn't know where the on button was. So it was fast learning. What I did actually do is spend a day a week in Burnley, where I had previously worked, because it was something I knew, and it was a relief, and it was relaxing. And I kept working with the speech and language therapy manager there, Sean Davis, who gave me the opportunity to have something normal in my life while I learned all this academic stuff. And that saved me, I think, probably. I kept a bit of balance.
I was, as I say, I was a superintendent before I started doing my PhD, and I had medics who worked with me. So when I was a junior researcher, I was working with medics, and they were fantastic with me, actually. They were, I didn't make me feel awkward or a novice. They were just absolutely really supportive, and if you get the right ones to support you, that transition can be really, really okay.
Any other questions? Well, what I want to do is... Oh, sorry, it's easy. Hiding in the corner in my blind spot.
So for me, everyone knows me, one of the really important things I think we need to crack is the width of the base of our pyramid. And I keep doing this all the time in meetings. So we've got lots of people, which is great, doing MScs and now increasingly doing PhDs. But boy, does that drop off very quickly at a postdoc level. How do we keep our AHPs enthused, energetic and driven to continue so that the pyramid is more of a pyramid and we have research leaders really emerging for the future?
Who's going to take that one on?
We're going to ponder that for a minute because it's a big task, isn't it?
Any other answers from the audience?
I think it's at a number of different levels, isn't it? And one of them has to be at a policy level, one has to be at that NHS university interface, and another has to be at a personal, personal levels, and they have to have answers at all three of those. And some of the things that I think mitigate against it is this competing measures. University measures are different from NHS measures. People's personal lives are different from their career lives. So I think that there are a number of ways in which it needs to be addressed, but I don't have a particular answer for any of them. Rebecca?
A bit of an idea. Well, I think obviously I think it's about planning early as well, possibly, when people are coming to the end of their masters or coming to the end of their PhDs, planning ahead about what's next, so they don't sort of drop off the edge of a cliff and you lose them from academia. But we talk a lot about capacity building, I think, and I think we need to talk more about capacity sustaining. And I think that's probably about thinking with, so if you're responsible for supervising a student, thinking with them before they get to the end, what's next, and helping them, supporting them to put in maybe their first bids postdocs, so they keep developing, keep going on beyond that level. Just an idea.
Pam, have you got an answer
Yes,
to that?
if I may, I'd like to come back to that point made earlier. I think it's very important for the NHS to realise that actually research is important to their clinical effectiveness and quality assurance, and we haven't got that across very well. In the job plans of consultants, there is a recognition that embedding research as part of senior consultants is of value from the quality assurance and the efficiency of the service. We haven't got that in many of the job plans for allied health. So, and unfortunately, the agenda for change grade 8 is reducing in many of our professions, and that's just the one that does actually mention research as being valuable. And so I would very much look at how can we ensure the NHS sees that this is valuable.
Heidi, have you... I'm sorry. We've got a whole half hour.
Thank you. I think there's a couple of points to make, and sorry, yes, I should introduce myself. My name is Heidi Siddle. I've got an NIHR clinical lectureship. I have a post that's 2 days with the NHS in Leeds Teaching Hospitals, and I have my other 2-day post is at the University of Leeds. And a big piece of work that we're involved with at the moment is research capacity building for allied health professionals, and working across the university and the NHS organisation. And certainly I agree with your point about embedding research within the NHS. And I think, not to make a criticism about today, but today has been all about academia. And what we haven't seen represented so far today is that NHS clinical academic. And so one of the things that we're doing is looking at a pathway that actually takes people that at any point that they engage in research activity, and we ensure that they stay within the NHS and that is continued and their experience and their expertise is valued. But also, and one of the ways of doing that is to look at this memorandum of understanding. You highlighted so well that medics have that, plunging into research, back into their clinical careers, but they've always been exposed to it. And so we are working with our HR colleagues in the university and the trust to develop a memorandum of understanding so that medics, so allied health professionals, nurses, non-medics can have that same role and dip in and out as before. So I think even today, and I'm a great advocate of everything today, all we have seen is the academic point of view today and not that real clinical academic.
You'll hear it later.
You'll hear it later.
Thank you.
Is there anything anybody else wants to add on that subject before we go for tea? But I can't keep Joe
Yeah, I
quiet.
just think also, following on from that, I think we do really need to think about hardwiring into the NHS. So the whole idea about having research in job descriptions and getting our clinical leaders to think about that. We have to hardwire it now if we're thinking about developing research and clinical practice together. And I think if we have managers in the audience, it's really thinking about that is your major contribution you can make to really thinking about getting clinical academic careers going.
I think, can I just make a point? Oh, I don't know. Sorry. I think that's really important. And in radiotherapy, that's one thing that we have got right, actually, is that there is research in everybody's job description. I think what the difficulty for us is, it's a very emerging profession. I couldn't answer your question, Nadine, because we're looking to people like your professions and the other professions who are further ahead than us as to how we do get that top bit, because we haven't got that many. There's hardly any. So I find that really difficult.
Sorry, Alex.
Yeah, hello. My name is Alex Thompson. I work at Doncaster and Bassetlaw Hospitals. I'm the AHP research lead there. I'm a physiotherapist and in a consultant role. I just wanted to come back on that, people coming back into clinical practice after doing research, NIHR research activities. We've got a couple of people coming back from doing their MRes at the moment, and that is they're new things for us and a challenge for us to to embrace those people's skills. Yeah. But I think coming at it, I just wanted to make a comment about the NHS in terms of this. And again, it's about almost what's in it for them in terms of your management and the research department as well. And we've done quite well in terms of developing research in AHPs purely because we've tapped into the fact that the research department, they are all about portfolio study numbers. And by doing that and embracing that within AHPs and getting involved in studies, with portfolio studies, we've been able to show the utility of AHPs in doing that, having PIs in that, and then also going at it from the clinical academic pathway as well. But I do think it's it still remains quite a challenge for us to support people in coming back, but it's a very important thing that we do. And when employers do support people to go on an AHR pathways, it's very important that even at the very beginning when they support people and say, we are going to support you with this, that they have an output for when that person has finished. It's not just in that sort of last few months. It must be a good, clear understanding there, and it's about that future planning.
Thank you for that useful comment. I'm going to draw the conversation to a close now because it's lunchtime. If you want to continue it over lunch or continue it on the Twitter hashtag, please do so. Thank you.